Hey, it's Liz from No Trace. I have another project to help you tackle your selvage edges of fabric as well as any long, thin scraps of fabric. It's a super cute zipper pouch with a fun diamond pattern. This is the perfect size for pencils or small overnight toiletries or makeup or art supplies, and it actually sews up super fast. So let's go. All right, let me show you the materials that you'll need to make a scrappy little selvage edge zipper pouch like this. I am working with 6 squares of cotton batting that are all 3.5 by 3.5 inches. I also have a whole bunch of selvage edges and long, thin scraps of fabric. I'm using a 7-inch zipper. I have 2 pieces of fabric for the inside liner of the bag that are 8.5 inches wide and 6 inches tall. And for the back side of the outside of the bag, I have another piece of fabric that's 8.5 inches wide, 6 inches tall, and a piece of cotton batting that I'm going to quilt it onto. You could also use canvas for this part. You could also make another panel with a bunch of squares of cotton batting, or you can just use regular quilting cotton and reinforce it with a little batting. The first step is to start selecting some pieces of fabric to sew onto your squares. I'm gonna go with some kind of blues and purplish colors, and I am just going to start sewing them on at a diagonal from corner to corner over at the sewing machine. I put my stitch length on the longest setting, so for my Juki that is 5 millimeters, and I'm just going to sew straight down from corner to corner. Okay, I have my first one attached. I'm just going to trim it because this is a much longer piece than I need. So now I'm going to select the next selvage edge or string, and I'm going to place it right side together with my first piece and join them with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm just going to go straight down following the edge of my fabric. Once it's attached, I'm going to open it and press it down with my fingers, and then I'm going to add another row of stitches on top of this piece. Okay, I'm going to keep sewing strips of fabric until this whole square of batting is covered. So I'll be right back. Okay, my first square is totally covered with scraps. So what I'm going to do now is flip it over so I can actually see the square and just tidy it up so it's back to a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square. So I'm going to use my rotary cutter and my mat and a ruler. I find it a little easier this way, but if you don't have all these supplies, just use your scissors. You could just trace some straight lines and just cut with your scissors. This is kind of a satisfying part. If you haven't seen any of my other selvage edge videos, this is always my favorite part. Very satisfying. I should probably do a reel of just doing stuff like this. That'd be kind of fun. Okay, I have my little square. So now I'm going to go through the same steps with the 5 other squares. So I'll be right back. All right, I've got all 6 of my little squares finished. So next I'm just going to arrange them in whatever pattern. I did this sort of pattern on my first bag, so I think I might do something similar again on this bag. And just like that. Then I will sew these together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to place these right sides together and then take them to the machine and sew right along this bottom edge with a 1/2 inch. At the machine here, I turned my stitch length back down to 3 millimeters, which is my more standard stitch length. And I want to make sure to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end of each of these seams. Now that all 3 of these pairs have been sewn, I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to trim the extra fabric away from the seam. So I'm going to trim the seam allowance. And of course, I'm going to save my tiny bits for my tiny bits bin. And this will become stuffing or some other sort of project. Next, I am going to open up the seams and iron them so that they lay nice and flat. So I'm just gonna open them up with my fingers and then carefully, without burning myself, press them nice and flat. Okay, I finished trimming and ironing the backs on all of these pairs. I think I forgot what order I had them in, so I'm just gonna take a minute and make sure that they are arranged how I like them. And then I'm going to go through those same general steps to sew these 2 panels together and then cut the extra fabric and iron it open and then sew this guy on. So I'm going to go through those steps and show you how it looks. And I just want to point out that I'm also going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance when I sew these together. And I want to make sure that this middle seam is lined up on both of my pieces. And I also want to make sure to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, my outer panel is finished. And this part definitely takes the longest, but it's also kind of the most fun. And the rest of this bag sews up super fast, so let me show you how to attach this to the zipper. I'm going to take my zipper and put it right side to right side onto the top edge of my outer panel. And then I'm going to go ahead and clip it in place. These are just regular old metal office binder clips. I use these because they are 100% plastic free and recyclable. Now I'm going to take one of my pieces of liner fabric and I'm going to place this right side to right side, and I'm going to add it into the clips, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew. At the machine, I'm going to swap out my standard presser foot for my more narrow zipper foot. This will help me sew a little closer to the middle teeth. So I'm just going to click that into place and make sure my stitch length is at 3 millimeters. That's my kind of go-to. And now I am going to sew straight down this top edge, and I want to make sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end. I'm sewing with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, as I get near the zipper pull, that really bulky spot, I am going to push it out of the way. So let me just show you. I'm going to leave my needle down. I'm going to take this clip off, and I'm going to lift my presser foot. I have a knee bar, so I can lift my presser foot, and then I'm just going to push this zipper pull towards the back, and then line up the edge again, and then just keep going. Okay, the first side is done, and I'm going to go ahead and close the zipper back up, and now I'm going to attach the next 2 parts of the bag to this side of the zipper. I went ahead and quilted the other the fabric I'm using for the back of my bag just with some simple straight lines. So that is going to go right side on top of my first piece. And you can always double check that the print is going in the right direction. So imagine if you just flip this over, is your print pointed the right way? Then you're good to go. And I'm going to go ahead and clip this in place. then I'm gonna grab my last piece of material here, another piece of fabric for the inside, and this I'm gonna place right side on top of my first inner piece, and I'm gonna add it into the clips. So we are making a little zipper sandwich here. And once again, I'm gonna sew straight along this edge. Okay, I've got both sides attached to the zipper. So here's the outer side, here's the inside of the bag. So I wanna take a moment and press the fabric away from the zipper really well, especially on the inside. So I'm just ironing right alongside the zipper here. I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna do the same thing with this fabric. Just iron it away from the zipper so it's not gonna get caught in the zipper when you are opening and closing your bag. Now I'm gonna take this to the machine and I'm gonna top stitch along this edge and this edge. But the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna actually flip this fabric out of the way so that when I sew, I'm only sewing along this fabric. Okay, I bumped my stitch length back up to the maximum so that it matches the stitches over here. And I'm just gonna go straight down. And when I'm near this pull, I'm gonna lift my presser foot and push the pull out of the way towards the back. There we go, and then just keep going. Now I'm gonna sew the other side, but once again, I'm gonna make sure that this fabric is pulled to the side, out of the way. So I'm only sewing the outer fabric. And here we go. Okay, our zipper pouch is almost done. What I'm gonna do next is make sure the zipper's open about halfway, bring the outer pieces together and the inner pieces together. And then I am going to start at the sides, line up the seams of the outer pieces and make sure that the zipper tape, this fabric-y part, is pointing into the bag. And then I'm gonna put a clip right there. And then flip it over and do the same thing on this end. Make sure that these seams are lined up nicely. Make sure the zipper tape is pointed to the inside of the bag. And then I'm gonna get a clip in place. I'm gonna add a no trace tag. This is totally optional. I'm gonna put it in between the outer layers and I'm gonna put it towards the back end of the zipper where the zipper stops. And you can do it wherever you want or totally skip this part. And then I'm just gonna clip it. I'm gonna add a few more clips to the bag and then we'll sew our second to last seam. Okay, at the machine, I have my standard presser foot back in place. I took off the zipper foot. And now I'm gonna start sewing on the liner fabric. I'm gonna start sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance about 2 inches away from the corner. Make sure to back stitch. And I'm gonna go all the way around, except I'm gonna leave an opening in this liner fabric so that I can turn the whole thing right side out. Okay, it's time to birth the bag, as they say, the grand reveal, as I say. So I'm just reaching my hand in and opening up the zipper all the way because that makes this a little bit easier. There we go. And then I am going to grab and pull. Now, if you wanted to trim away some of the seam allowance, you could. I'm leaving it in place. It's going to give the bag a little bit more structure and firmness. So I'm gonna leave that, but you do you. Also, it's less tiny bits for my tiny bits bin if I just leave them in place, which is something that I like. All right, I'm gonna get my handy dandy chopstick and push the corners out of my bag. If you wanted really sharp corners, that would be a good reason to trim your seam allowance. I don't need them to be super sharp, so just doing that. Okay, looks good. So the last seam here is to close up the opening that I left on the inside. So first I want to make sure that I have all the corners pushed out. And then if you wanted, you could iron this opening, or you could just finger press it if it doesn't look like it's going to challenge you that much at the machine. For me, I'm just going to do a finger press and close it up. I pushed the liner fabric back to the inside and my little zipper pouch is all done. I hope this project inspires you to put even your tiniest scraps of fabric to good use. And if you want more scrappy inspiration, I'd love for you to check out my membership. Just click on the join button below this video to learn more.